They say children are resilient, but resilience is not healing. It's not safety. It's adaptation in a world that forces them to survive, not thrive. In homes haunted by alcoholism, love becomes inconsistent. A parent you adore one day turns into a stranger the next. You stop asking for hugs and start scanning faces. You become an expert in emotional weather. Is today calm, or is the storm coming? Imagine coming home from school, and before opening the door you pause, listening. Not for music, not for laughter, but for silence, broken glass, or slurred voices. You wonder, is Dad drinking again? Is Mom crying behind a locked door? That is what it's like to live with emotional landmines. You never know where to step safely. So you tiptoe through your own childhood, hoping to avoid the explosions. But trauma doesn't only come from what happens. Sometimes it comes from what doesn't. From the apology that never arrives, the birthday forgotten, the hug that's withheld. From a parent who shows up physically, but checks out emotionally. In these families, roles reverse. Children become caregivers. You learn to soothe a parent instead of the other way around. You become the mediator, the protector, the therapist. Before you even know how to spell those words, you suppress your needs because the household doesn't have room for them. You become the good kid, the quiet one, the one who doesn't make trouble, doesn't cry, doesn't complain. But inside, your soul is starving. Freud said children blame themselves, not because they're guilty, but because blaming themselves is easier than accepting that the people they love are incapable of protecting them. If they believe it's my fault, then maybe, just maybe, they can fix it. That belief becomes a coping mechanism, then a personality trait, then a lifelong wound. And what does that wound become? It becomes the adult who overthinks every relationship, who apologizes for existing, who feels guilty when resting, who clings too tightly, or pushes everyone away, who can't tell the difference between love and manipulation because they were taught both by the same hands. It becomes hyper-independence, mistaken for strength, perfectionism, mistaken for ambition, anxiety, mistaken for oversensitivity, loneliness, mistaken for self-sufficiency. The alcoholic home teaches you, be small, be silent, be invisible. The less you are, the safer you'll be. But here's the truth. No child should have to become smaller to survive. No child should have to guess whether they're lovable today. No child should have to wonder if they caused the chaos they were born into. Yet this is the reality for many. And the tragedy. These children grow into adults who carry their unhealed stories into every room, every relationship, every mirror. They don't always know they're wounded because they were praised for how well they coped, for being mature, self-sufficient, low maintenance. But inside, they're still that kid, waiting for a parent to say, I see you, I'm sorry, it wasn't your fault. And when that moment never comes, the healing must begin within. It starts with naming the truth. My parent was not emotionally safe. I was not the problem. I didn't imagine the pain. From there, healing becomes possible. Slowly, tenderly, through boundaries, through honesty, through learning that love doesn't mean chaos, and that peace doesn't mean silence. Most importantly, healing means unlearning the belief that you are too much or never enough. You are not a burden. You were burdened. And now, you get to lay it down. You might not remember every fight, every broken plate, every slurred insult, but your body does. Long after the shouting stops, long after the front door slams shut, your nervous system is still bracing for the next emotional ambush. You flinch at sudden noises. You stiffen when someone raises their voice, even in laughter. You apologize before you've done anything wrong. Because the body of a child raised in a home ruled by alcohol learns this. Danger is always around the corner, and safety is never guaranteed. Science calls this hypervigilance, survival mode, a state where your brain is wired to expect harm, so it becomes obsessed with control. You don't just overthink. You rehearse disasters in your head like rituals. You try to anticipate everyone's needs before they say a word, because when you were little, guessing what your parent needed could mean the difference between calm and chaos. This isn't anxiety. It's a memory, a somatic imprint. Your body learned that love could turn to violence, that affection could be a trap, that comfort could vanish in a bottle. So now, even when you're with someone kind, your body resists. When they get close, you tense up. When they offer stability, you don't trust it. You scan for red flags. Not because you want to sabotage love, but because you've never known it without strings. Your body became your shield, your protector. But now that same shield is keeping the good stuff out, too. And here's the cruel part. No one sees this. On the outside, you might seem composed, high-functioning, even successful. But inside, you're exhausted. You're carrying 10,000 invisible pounds of history on your back, in your chest, behind your smile. You weren't built for that. You just got used to it. Healing begins when you realize this. Your body isn't betraying you. It's trying to protect you from pain it never wants to feel again. The panic, the withdrawal, the distrust. These aren't defects, they're adaptations, but survival mode is not meant to be a lifestyle. You deserved to grow out of it, but you never got the chance. That's what recovery is, giving your body what it never received. Not just therapy sessions and self-help books, but slowness, stillness, breath. Letting yourself rest without fear. Letting your body unclench without guilt. Letting yourself be cared for by yourself. Because here's the paradox. The healing of the mind begins in the body. Not in thoughts, but in sensations. In moments where you finally feel what safety tastes like. When no one is yelling and no one is disappearing. You reclaim your nervous system not with control, but with kindness. When your stomach tenses, you ask it, "What are you afraid of?" When your hands shake, you say, "I'm here. You're safe now." When your breath shortens, you whisper, "It's not then, it's now." This is what breaking generational cycles looks like. Not a grand declaration, but 1,000 quiet moments of compassion, of choosing not to react, of choosing not to run, of staying present, even when it's hard. You are not fragile. You are not broken. You are finally listening to the body that's been screaming in silence for years. And when your body starts to trust you, everything begins to change. It's easy to say you should leave. Easy to tell someone, just walk away. But love, especially the kind that forms around a wound, isn't logical. It's magnetic, addictive, and often invisible from the outside. Many children of alcoholics grow up to become partners of alcoholics. It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. Because when your earliest definition of love includes chaos, inconsistency, and emotional hunger, your body registers that as familiar, and therefore safe. So you fall for people who mirror the instability you grew up with. Not because you want to suffer, but because your nervous system is searching for home. Even if home was a war zone. This is why love can feel like walking on eggshells. Why you feel addicted to proving your worth to someone who keeps pulling away. Why you confuse intensity with intimacy and survival with devotion. You think, if I can just love them enough, they'll stop drinking. If I just don't trigger them, things will be calm. If I become perfect, they'll finally choose me. But that's not love. That's self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to disappear. Not all at once, but in pieces. You silence your anger. You downplay your needs. You apologize for their behavior. You cover up their shame. Until one day, you don't recognize yourself anymore. This is the hidden cost of loving someone with an addiction. You start sacrificing your reality for theirs. You minimize your truth to make space for their chaos. You carry both your pain and theirs. But no one was meant to bear that much weight alone. Codependency is not a weakness. It's a survival strategy. It's how you learn to stay close to someone dangerous without being destroyed. But it comes with a price. Your boundaries, your clarity, your voice. And here's the truth that may break your heart. No amount of love can save someone who is not willing to save themselves. You can be compassionate, supportive, present, but you cannot be a savior. That role will only bury you. The turning point comes when you realize that choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's liberation. You're not being cruel by setting boundaries. You're not selfish for walking away. You're not broken for wanting peace. You are learning a new definition of love, one that includes you this time. Because true love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't thrive on fear. It doesn't keep you up at night wondering, is it me? Real love feels like safety, like clarity, like a home where the door doesn't slam and the silence doesn't sting. So if you've been loving someone who keeps hurting you, pause. Ask yourself, when did I start believing that love means suffering? Ask, what would it feel like to be loved and not have to earn it? You might not know yet, and that's okay. The path back to yourself is not paved with certainty, but with courage. Courage to sit with the discomfort, courage to name what's been denied, courage to choose a different ending than the one you inherited, and that choice, that single, trembling act of self-loyalty, can rewrite generations of pain. Because the moment you say, I matter too, something ancient in your lineage starts to break, and something sacred begins to rebuild. What if the pain you've carried wasn't just yours? What if the ache in your chest, the anxiety in your gut, the sadness in your bones was inherited, passed down like an old photograph, like a song you never chose to hear, but somehow memorized every word? This is the truth most people never talk about. Emotional patterns are generational. Alcoholism doesn't just damage the present, it echoes into the future. Unhealed pain becomes a blueprint, and unless someone chooses differently, it gets repeated, quietly, automatically. You don't just grow up with the wound, you become it. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize, I am loving the way I was loved. I am abandoning myself the way I was abandoned. I am hurting others the way I was hurt. But here's the miracle buried inside that realization. If the pain can be passed down, so can the healing. The cycle only continues when it remains unconscious. But the moment you name it, the moment you bring it into the light, you begin to change the story. You begin to rewrite the ending. This doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It doesn't mean forgiving too soon or making peace with something that still burns. It means giving yourself permission to feel it all, to grieve not just what happened, but what never did, the nurturing you didn't receive, the apologies you never got, the safety you always longed for. This is what healing truly is, not forgetting, not excusing, but transforming, turning pain into wisdom, turning silence into voice, turning survival into sovereignty. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to fix everything overnight. You just have to begin. With one breath, one boundary, one honest conversation. Maybe that means going to therapy. Maybe it means ending a toxic relationship. Maybe it means standing in the mirror and saying, I am not broken, I was wounded, and now I'm healing. This work is not glamorous. It's not always visible. But it is sacred. Because every time you choose not to lash out the way you were lashed at, every time you choose to soothe instead of scream, every time you stop yourself from disappearing just to be loved, you are breaking the chain. You are interrupting history. You are becoming the ancestor you needed. And slowly, everything changes. Your nervous system, your relationships, your dreams. You begin to breathe differently, love differently, live differently. No longer from fear, but from choice. No longer from scarcity, but from truth. And one day, without even noticing, you realize that the past no longer controls your future, that your story no longer ends with pain. It ends with power, because you made a decision. You said, it ends with me. And from that place, from that courageous declaration, a new legacy begins.